Welcome to another episode of 5 Minutes with Mike. I'm your host, Michael D. Beckford. We're going to get right into our episode for today. Joe Crime Bill Biden blocks D.C. crime reform. Joe Crime Bill Biden blocks D.C. crime reform. Ain't that something? Joseph R. Biden, the current president of the United States, has recently blocked a crime reform measure by the District of Columbia to change some of the sentencing laws and disparities that exist with the laws that have been on the books for nearly 100 years that continue to suppress and or unfairly punish black and minorities. Listen, we all know that crime after the pandemic has increased in more ways than one. But the way to fight crime has never been to try and over-police yourself out of crime. Just look at the example of Chicago. They have more police officers than ever before, and yet they still have more crime than ever before. The math ain't mathing. Unless you get down to the root evil of crime in itself, the cause and effect of low-paid jobs, worker discrimination, lack of opportunities in urban centers, lack of funding, lack of education, and the list goes on and on. We all know this. They all know this. They always seem to find a way to pay for those overly bloated police budgets, but can't seem to give housing to the very poor unless it comes to the untraditional sense, aka jail. President Biden got a lot of flack for his passage of the 1994 and the authoring of the 1994 crime bill, which many say has been the tool that allowed the federal government, state, and local governments to lock up as many black people as possible for petty crimes and crimes in some cases that do not exist anymore, aka weed, marijuana, at least in certain states. In the 2020 election, black people were warned about Joe Biden. This man is over 80 years old, and unfortunately, many black constituents thought that he was going to be someone that was going to change. I don't think so. Joe Biden selected a black VP only for the purpose of basically guaranteeing the black vote. Because unfortunately, when it comes down to black people, we move by shiny object symbols and ideologies that generally don't change a damn thing that's wrong with this nation. So, when Joe Crime Bill Biden sided with the Republicans in regards to not allowing the duly elected D.C. governance to reform a much-needed criminal justice system, he, along with a few Democrats and a majority of Republicans, blocked the measure from happening. Surprise! Not really.
This is 5 Minutes with Mike, our news, our voice, and our opinion. With your host, Michael Beckford. Now stop, listen, and pay attention for 5 Minutes with Mike.
And this episode of 5 Minutes with Mike is sponsored by the Urban Classics Collection. Download 12 ebooks plus 3 audiobooks, all for less than the price of a hardback book. With best-selling titles such as Dying to Be Straight and thought-provoking books such as Speak Up Poetry and Dirty Negroes, this collection of urban books and audiobooks is great for those that are lovers of African American literature. All 12 ebooks in the Urban Classic Collection is written by me, Michael D. Beckford. Link is in the description below. Get 12 ebooks plus 3 audiobooks for less than the price of a hardback book. What are you waiting for? Download this collection today for only $29.99. Help support this channel by downloading this collection today for only $29.99. Link is in the description below. Now, let's get back into our episode. Joe Crime Bill Biden blocks D.C. crime reform. And on to our first segment. No pro-black agenda has yet to pass under the Biden administration. The George Floyd Justice Policing Act has not passed. The new Voting Rights Act has not passed to stop these majority Republican states from depressing and repressing votes in majority blue cities, aka Democratic cities. Joe Crime Bill Biden has talked a good game and even visited the George Floyd family, made promises that he's yet to keep, And if he decides to run in 2024, he's going to give the age-old spiel that just give me 4 more years and I'm going to get it done. Politicians. Trust that the words that's coming out of their mouth is more likely a lie. What's going on with those student loan debt forgiveness? I'm still waiting, Joe. Here's the thing. At least, there was a similar promise that Obama gave us. And unfortunately, outside of symbolism and a few great things, we also didn't get much out of Obama either, as far as the black improvement as a whole for the black community. Our cities are still run down. Our jails are still overfilled. And with the blockage of this DC reform, Biden wants to fill more jails just like he did in 1994 and beyond. On to my next segment. A wolf in sheep's clothing is still a wolf. Absolutely. The late, great Dr. Maya Angelou famously said that if a person shows you who they are, believe them. Honestly, I think I botched. That is not one of the best Dr. Maya Angelou voices. Oh my gosh. I actually seen Dr. Maya Angelou before in person. I didn't actually had a chance to greet her per se, but I was at the University of Miami. She spoke at the University of Miami and gave a very prolific speech. She oozes with education, rhythm, and just persona. They don't really make them anymore. I mean, Anyway, on to my last segment. Black people have a lot of enemies and very few friends. Black people have a lot of enemies and very few friends. Because of the fact that I've lived my entire life as only a black male, I don't identify as a black male. I didn't change or transform or morph into a black male. No. God chose me to be a young black male from the time of birth to the time of my death. And one thing that I have come to realize very on in my life is the very fact that we as black people have more enemies than we do friends. We are naturally enemies of the state because they didn't want us here outside of being in chains and delivering prosperity for their own sakes and for the kids and grandkids that have inherited the labor and sweat of our backs. All right. So that's our first enemy. The state wants to do nothing more than to lock up young black males who have no type of representation, or at least not the type of representation that matters, aka the type of legal representation that they would need to fight these trigger happy court systems. But anyway, I digress. We as black people here in America are enemies of our own selves. Yeah, that's right. We continue to kill each other over territory disagreements and childish anger and humility. We have more guns on our streets than ever before. We're targeting ourselves like we've never done before. Yes, it's real. But I've done a whole nother episode about quote unquote the black on black crime, how that's also a myth at the same time. Because as we all know, or at least those that are actually educated folks that look into this thing, crime happens to any particular group of individual that is within close proximity of another. If there's a majority of black people within a certain percentage city, then of course they're going to commit more crimes against themselves. If there's a majority of white people within a close vicinity, then they're going to commit more crimes against themselves. So, yes, I've done a whole episode referring to this particular measure, and I'll do another one another day because it's still a problem, obviously. Now, we have another common enemy, and that is the Food and Drug Administration. You wouldn't have guessed it, but yeah, I think that they can be an enemy of black people. This administration is in cahoots with the pharmaceutical companies and also the fast food chains that almost only seemingly trend upwards in black communities. Why can't our hoods have Chipotle's and Trader Joe's? We love eating healthy too. We love working out. We want to live long, prosperous lives. But yet we are filled with some of the most filth and grade EF meat that's possible by companies like Taco Bell, burger joints that constantly feed us grease and clog up our arteries. And then because of this mistreatment of our bodies for the quote unquote cheap food, we have to now rely on statins, blood pressure medications, and diabetic medications just for our everyday for survival. Yes, so this DC reform situation is more than just a crime bill. It's about an overall way of life. It's about wanting to live the so-called American dream, but always knowing that you're stuck in a nightmare. And of course, to my racist white friends, they are always going to say, well, you have a choice. Got a choice. It's always a choice. And that is correct. And he always wants us to go and say, well, look at LeBron James. Look at this famous rapper. He or she made it out of the hood. Funny how they always point to celebrity when it comes down to making it out of the hood. The same celebrities we point to as well as the black community. Okay? But what choice do you have if you live in a food desert and the nearest grocery store is 20 miles away? If mama ain't home till 9 o'clock, she gave you a little bit of change and told you to go down the street because she ain't fixing dinner tonight. To go down the street to get you the cheap 99-cent cheeseburger spent $5 or $6 enough to feed you and your two baby brothers. Yourself included, of course. And you yourself is only 11 years old, so you really don't know how to cook, but yet tomorrow, my white racist friends say you had a choice. But what's the choice when it's limited to one? I'll let that one breathe. And to my white racist friends that say, take a look at LeBron and all the new famous rappers, what they do, and they obviously don't understand the law of numbers statistically to become LeBron James. To become the next LeBron James, you're looking at a 0.001% opportunity to become the next LeBron James. There are only approximately 30 NBA teams, and on any given day, usually they only have a roster of roughly 15 or 20 players. Now, I'm not going to do the math. I'll let you, my white racist friend, do that math, because at the end of the day, the math is not mathing when, according to the last census, the African American population accounts for 43 million U.S. citizens. So I'm going to put it bluntly. Ain't no way in hell everybody's going to be the next LeBron James. So when it comes down to the case for opportunity, when it comes down to the case of equal justice, there just is no justice. When it comes down to the liberties and freedoms of everyday black Americans, especially in D.C., the District of Columbia, which is primarily governed by the federal government. Unlike we who get the luxury that lives in the other 50 states here in the U.S., which our government are duly elected with actual representatives that can vote on actual issues in the House and the Senate, the D.C. government is also basically full of figureheads. No true power, because at the end of the day, the federal government with cronies like Joe Crime Bill Biden can easily veto whatever it is that they want to do to help move forward and improve the lives of black people and everybody in between. Now, let's get into some black facts. Black facts. Clinton extolled the crime-fighting potential in the Violent Crime Control and Law Enforcement Act of 1994, now commonly referred to as the 1994 Crime Bill. The law's legacy is complicated. It contained powerful funding incentives that ensnared more Americans in the ever-widening net of the criminal justice system. But many of its provisions also protected communities and victims of crimes, like an assault weapons ban and protections for women in abusive relationships. Overall, though, the law is now seen by many as a major driver of mass incarceration. A lot of ink has been spilled trying to point the finger out at how exactly the United States became the world's #1 incarcerator, which is crazy. Today, 6.7 million people are under some sort of correctional control. Approximately 2.3 million are behind bars, in jails and prisons, and 4.5 million are on probation and parole. Now, let's take them to church. Hallelujah. The legacy of Martin Luther King has been whitewashed by white Republicans, lazy Democrats, and no one that truly gives a damn about black people. Martin Luther King was more than just a dream. He was a man that sought to take action against the suppression of his people. And I'm afraid that if he was still alive today, he would be ashamed of how far he thought he was going to how backwards we seem to also go. And one of the best ways to help support this channel is by purchasing our newly minted merch. Introducing the Michael Beckford collection, a new collection of socially conscious apparel. Get your tees, hoodies, caps, and more. Link is in the description below. And 5 Minutes of Mike is written, produced, and directed by Michael D. Beckford. All rights reserved. Copyright 2023 by Speak Publishing International and Michael Beckford Media Group, LLC production. Thank you for listening and watching.